Hey everyone. So hopefully you can see my screen right off the bat. I'm using the World Bank Group website. You can just type that into Google and then type in like GDP, and it will typically bring you a page here. I typed in Japan, Spain, France. So it's pretty neat. So you can just type it in here. See France. Click on like the little location marker there, and it'll add it to your graph that you're looking at. I have it in a line. You can change it to like bar and map. It's pretty neat. In case you know, if you didn't know that, like France owns part of this little chunk here and over here too. Um, Anyways, we're gonna use the line graph. There's a cool little slider. We're not gonna go all the way back to 1960 because we just don't need that many data points. We'll go to 2015. And then if you highlight over the year, see how it says, well, I'm pointing at my screen, but 2023, 2024, 2022. So this is GDP for these three countries. Okay? So you look at it and you're like, oh, wow, Spain's hurting. They're not doing so good. 1.73, France 3.16, and Japan is 4.03. And these are in trillions of dollars. So some people, the majority of Americans will just be like, look at that, like Japan's killing it. Look at Japan go. And France is, close behind and doing well, and Spain's doing whatever Spain's doing. Obviously, it is important to watch these trend lines and to see, oh, look at that. There's a dip happening. And hey, look at this. There's a steady increase. Those are important to take note too, not just the hard numbers at each point. But anyways, moving past GDP, I like to talk about GDP, but we want GDP per capita. So GDP per capita, let me bring it up here. Well, let me bring up the population first, because that's how we get the per capita. So this one, same deal, population total, Japan, Spain, and France. And Japan's got a massive population, 123,975,371, counted down to the last person. Obviously, censuses, like a census, like all this data, kind of take it with a grain of salt because there's flaws in data. This is not absolute. There's flaws and stuff. Okay, so yeah, look, Spain's got a really low population. It had the lowest GDP too. France, second lowest population, second lowest GDP in our last graph there, and then Japan has the highest population, highest GDP. You're like, all right, well look at that. Like, kind of makes sense. They got a higher population. They There's more people to participate in the economy, so maybe they have a higher GDP. So we're gonna go look, and we're gonna bring up per capita, GDP per capita. And here we go. Now GDP, yep, GDP per capita. And what we do here is we take the total GDP divided by the population, and it gives us this. Now look, France is looking pretty hot, huh? They moved up into first place. Spain is in second. They were all the way in the back. They were end of the race, and I'm just kidding. And then Japan's not doing so hot either. Again, these are averages, so like that old saying. I don't know if it's an old saying, but I hear it a lot. Is where it's like, oh, the average birth rate in a house in America is like two and a half children per family, and it's like, well, where do you get that half? Like you can have two kids, or you can have three kids. You can't have half a kid. So remember that when you're looking at like graphs and stuff. But yeah, Japan's not looking so good. So now people might say, "Oh wow, like Japan, you suck. Like what's happening? Like why are you doing so poorly relative to these two other selected countries?" And that's very important is relativity. They're all relative. You're comparing one to another to another to another. And again, too, this something that gets overlooked with GDP and GDP per capita. A lot of metrics actually is well, I'll just stick with GDP and GDP per capita is distribution. Like in textbooks that teach economics, they explain, unless it's a terrible textbook, but everyone I've read says like GDP does not account for distributions. So remember that. And a lot of people don't. They just go, wow, look at that. If I go to Spain, I'm going to get $35,000 a year, probably on average. Or if I go to France, I'll get 46. Maybe I'll go work in France and I don't know, like get citizenship there or something. I don't know. But no, I don't want to go to Japan anymore, even though, if you recall, just a few minutes ago, oops, I hit the wrong button. Uh, Japan was killing it. Look at Japan. Wow. Um, but now per capita, they oh, I did it again. I'm sorry. Still learning this stuff. Um, Not so hot, are they? They're all the way down here. And so, what is distributions? Here we go. I got this cool new whiteboard here. So I drew this ahead of time. So distributions is how much of the population within that country has what is claimed in all these metrics, indexes like GDP measures. So it does not, GDP does not account for distribution. So GDP doesn't see this like little drawing here. This GDP does not care about this. It doesn't know. It was like a potato. Um, it doesn't know about it. Doesn't care. It just goes, here's the number. Same with GDP per capita. It does not account for distribution. It's just averaging it. GDP per capita is just like mashing these together. It's like, boom, you go together now, and now you're per capita. That's what you are. When in reality, you can have a country could have this kind of a scenario where there are less this is supposed to be population, and this is population, and then this is obviously money measured, or GDP measured in money. Boo. So anyways, point being is that like this stuff is important to keep in mind, because it's not, these aren't hard and fast. Remember, take it with a grain of salt. So like in America, this is more the situation where we have a higher population of the country with less of the wealth, and a lower population of the country with more of the wealth. There's lots of different ways to say that, but that's essentially what we have here in America for the most part. And there's everywhere in between, and money's here, and people's there. Point being though is that keep in mind when you're listening to stuff like on the news, or if you are encouraged to do your own research and like look into things and just like, why is it like this? That you can see and go, whoa, you know what? Like this 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 doesn't make sense. Why is it like this? Remember some of the rules around it, and you might need to pick up like a legitimate textbook about it, that not a flashy one at like Barnes and Noble or something, like the really boring ones that are like not even like Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. Like don't go that way. Go towards like textbooks, like workbooks that have graphs and definitions of definitions, and read those, and then keep those, what you've learned in there, in mind when you're reading about, say, trade between one country or another, or GDP output, or like oil prices. It's super super interesting because it goes even deeper into like, well, what, like for oil, for example. I'm not an expert on oil, but I know a bit about it. And the more I learn from the people who are actually in oil, both like in the production and extraction and like completion part of it, as well as sales, the more I can understand what is actually happening with oil, instead of just like oil prices go up, gas go down, gas go up, oil go down, or whatever combination you want to put there. It's very insightful to learn rather than just reading it in a book and then kind of assuming you know everything, or looking at all this data. It's great data, it's cool, but it's very salty data, right? we got to take it with a grain of salt, and remember, hey, what is the real world scenario with this? We can't just go off of data alone. We need to we need to know the industry, and we need to know what in that industry is stable, and maybe what is becoming unstable or changing, shifting, moving, and that can help us to better understand that industry and where it's going, why it exists, to what degree it exists. Also, a lot of economists like to forecast. They're like, oh, a lot of people ask economists to forecast too. Okay, like if you're like, oh, I study money, people are gonna be like, tell me what money's gonna do. Oh, I study economies. You're like, tell me what the economy is gonna do. If there's money to be made or anything like that, a lot of people want projections. They want like little prophecies, little forecasts, little weather reports on what it's going to do. Keep that in mind as well, because that can change how you say things. Misconstruing things is pretty easy, especially when you're taking maybe a topic that you know well or know better than most, and trying to explain it in a simplified form without losing the detailed parts of it that give it the meaning. Um, and that's where we lose a lot of that. That's where a lot of things get lost in translation, or just literally lost in translation, because you're trying to take something that you take years and years and years learning, and then you try to explain it in a shorter format, simpler format, more digestible pieces, and it gets lost. And it gets so easily lost that the people consuming that information don't even know they're not that they've lost it. They don't even, they're eating up that info, and they don't even know that what they're eating anymore, or that they ate, but it feels like they did. So, anyways, that's a that's another thing for another time. All right, so if you got questions and stuff, I don't know, put them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. Or if I get too confused, I will just like make a video. Or if I try to answer something, but I'm like, well, this will be easier answered in a video, I'll do that. And I will also, if I can figure it out, I will put in the description of the video the World Bank stuff, so that you can use it yourself. It's pretty cool. It's cool. It's salty, but it's cool. Remember that. Salty data. That's a thing now.